Hello, everybody. Thank you once again for tuning into the In Win Out podcast. I'm your host, John, and today I'm with Aidan, good friend of mine. Here he is today. Go ahead and say hi, Aidan.
Hi, my name is Aidan. I'm smart, I'm dumb, I'm everywhere in between.
He's going to be a good guy
for a living, and I'm trying to figure out this whole life thing, because I was born, and I'm like, what's the answer? Why are we here? And then everybody's like, just because. And I never accepted that. That's not a good enough answer for me.
You know, I feel like a lot of people could agree with that as well. It's not a good enough answer for them. So pretty much one of the things I do, I don't try to title the podcast until pretty much we're done with it, because I feel like titling something kind of keeps you in the confines of what your idea for it is. However, you and I have already done some discussions, and you've done plenty of research as well. So today's episode is going to be about religion and philosophy, not religion and psychology, but we're also going to talk about psychology a little bit as well. Aidan, you had revealed to me that one of the things that more recently was apparent to you was the need to get baptized. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, I've been very fascinated with religion these past 5 years of my life. Mm-hmm. And I've read various different religions, not all equally in depth, mostly just Taoism and Christianity.
Interesting.
But I've read a little bit of Buddhism, and I've read a little bit of Islam, not too much though. And but there's this one text, early Christian text, which is not really used in any of the churches, called the Didache. And in it, it's kind of just it's a very short book. It's just kind of a guidebook on how to be a Christian, or how to just what the framework should be of what Jesus' teachers were. And one of them is just get baptized. And maybe it's just a silly little thing where you get water dumped on your head. But to me, it felt like it was something I needed to do. And
that's now, before we get too far, I have never heard, you said the deity?
The Didache.
The Didache, I was so wrong. The Didache. Now, Is that part of the Bible, perchance? I'm not very familiar with the Bible, but...
It's actually not.
Really?
But if you give me just 5 seconds, I'm actually going to go grab it off my bookshelf.
100%, yeah, I'll keep everybody occupied. And we had said this just in a second ago. Usually when we start the podcast, I usually like to give a little preface before to make sure that we're on the same page when we speak. So Aidan was revealing to me that his baptism was more of an informal baptism. We found it hilarious because today, actually, I just gotten back home. My niece, the youngest, newest member to our family, my little niece, my sister's daughter, got baptized today. And we're not very religious ourselves. We're not a really religious household. So we found that interesting. But just as well, we're there to support her and whatever her family decides. So we were there today. I think I was chewing gum in church the whole time, but that's just because I am who I am, perhaps. What do you got for us, Aidan?
Okay, yeah. So the Didache is it's very fascinating to me because it's kind of it just sort of surmises what Jesus was teaching, and to me it's got a lot of parallels to the Tao Te Ching, where it's which is the Taoism book of Taoism.
Okay.
And it's very dualist in nature, and the introduction of it is there are two paths, one of life and one of death, and the difference is great between the two paths. Now the path of life is this: first thou shalt love God who made thee, thy neighbor as thyself, and all things thou wouldest not should be done unto thee, do not thou unto another. Which is the golden rule, basically. Yep. And to me, it's well, that should just be the Bible. Don't just give people that. And there's a whole lot more to it. It's only a couple pages, but
have you read the Bible, Aidan?
Yes, not in completion, because there's a lot to it. Right. But I've read bits of the Old Testament. I've read Genesis, Exodus, and I'm currently working my way through the 4 Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Now, what's compelled you to more recently, say, experience religion?
More recently, it's just kind of felt like a necessity, because there's always been something inside myself that I felt that I've lacked, some sort of core being, it's something that you touched on before when we were recording, like maybe related to trauma or something, because I had not a traumatic upbringing, but certainly not a spiritually fulfilling or emotionally fulfilling upbringing at all. And the ideas of religion, not just Christianity, bring me a lot of peace of mind and keep me from going crazy.
And that's a really good thing, and that's one of the important things to remember when you evaluate religions, especially when you try to judge others for their religions, is that you don't know where people are, and you don't know why people have those beliefs. I had made this distinction earlier before we started recording. I have people in my life, or I know people personally, that's all they have left is a portion of the religion. Or rather, I have people where really traumatic things have happened to them, and their religion is their greatest chance for solace. It's the chance to say that they're going to see their family again. Some very traumatic things that I'm not going to repeat out of respect for my friends and my family had happened to this individual and his family, and he feels better knowing that there's a second chance for him to see the people that he lost. And I'm not ever going to say that that's not important or that he should give up on his religious values, because it's important enough for me to say that my religious values or lack thereof should supersede his idea of, I don't know, feeling better. So I can understand that entirely, and I feel like a lot of people look towards religion. And that's why, even as an atheist, I do think it's important for religion to exist as a chance or an opportunity for those who are encumbered by burden, or, that's a way to say, just hurt in any way, to eventually find it a little easier to get out of their funk or, help themselves.
Yeah. I for myself, I was born atheist and never attended church at all, and it seemed to me like it was just sort of a farce growing up. It was just sort of an old idea, just to give people some sort of comfort, maybe in an afterlife or something.
Right.
And just the more I've lived and the more I've experienced and the more I've seen, people's struggles, especially men nowadays, is
right.
It's made me think that maybe these old ideas should not be disregarded so quickly,
And I can agree with that. Personally, I'm not somebody, well, at least for the podcast's sake, I'm not somebody who tries to share my political views often, and I won't here for this insertion. But there is something to be said about, there's a reason that a conservative is a conservative. It's because there is some value in conserving what, could be lost to the nuances of time. I could agree just as well that there's plenty of things that possibly don't line up with the modern adaptations of lifestyle versus a more traditional approach. I feel like we've kind of lost that traditional approach. So it is important in my mind, at least as a person, to understand that the conservative values, say not just the traditional value in general, is something that should still be here in a fashion or regard. Not in its pure form of, there's indoctrination in the Bible that says things like slavery should be allowed. That's obviously not something that we can apply to a modern day standard, outside of our laws or our change of morals. So those things should be lost to time. Those things should be lost to reinterpretations of religion.
In regards to that slavery idea, I think it's very much the reason why the New Testament is called the New Testament and the Old Testament is called the Old Testament, because it's
right. And that I can understand
the new way
that.
of doing things.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. And there's a lot of distinction to be made between those that say the Bible, kind of everything in the New Testament is what they believe, and then everything in the Old Testament is, because there's Leviticus and there's Sodom and Gomorrah, or is it Gomorrah or I think it's Gomorrah.
Gomorrah.
Yeah, is it? Which are some of the worst stories in the entire Bible.
There's a lot of
there's some bad.
There's a lot of dark stuff in the Old Testament. A lot of 100%. Smashing babies on rocks and crazy, crazy things.
So it's with that in mind. However, that people still cling to the same idea of the Earth is only of a few thousand years old. It was created by God, and that Adam and Eve were the first two people to be on the Earth. That is the Old Testament.
I certainly view the Old Testament more metaphorically than it's less of It's
history.
not really it's not a science book, let me tell you.
Oh yeah, I mean, so this is a very interesting dichotomy between you and I, because I was raised as a Christian for half of my life and then found atheism as a substitution, or more of the answer to the lack of religion I was hoping for. But however, you have now gotten to the point where you were raised an atheist, but now you're coming into religion, or at least experiencing religion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very interesting. So I think you're prepared to talk today. I think that's very nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that made me, I guess, religious, and I think the main thing really has just been the power of prayer, where in the Bible it says that the religious people, the Jewish people, a lot of them, not all of them, some of them will make a big showing out of prayer, like being out in public and saying praise to God. But he says, like, the only real times like that you should be praying is to your Father in heaven in secret, alone in your room. And I've never really prayed, but recently this past year I have. And one interesting experience that kind of just like melted my mind is I was like laying in bed and I was thinking about a Bible verse that I had read where Jesus had said something along the lines of like, not everybody who cries Lord, Lord is welcome into the kingdom of heaven. Basically saying like there are religious hypocrites, obviously.
Right. Oh yeah, 100%. Interesting.
And so I was just like wondering, like, am I that person? Am I just studying all this stuff and kind of being a big hypocrite? And I was like, just asking, I was like, Jesus, do you see me? Is there any way that I'm this guy, that I'm not welcome into the kingdom of heaven, whether that be something here on earth or something in the afterlife?
Yeah.
And then I heard something in my head say John 1:47, and I don't know what that is. I don't really know the Bible that well. But then I opened my eyes, and my alarm clock is at the time 1:47. I was like, well, that's kind of a coincidence, but I don't really know. And then I open up my Bible and I go to the book of John, and I go to John chapter 1, and I read through it, and then I get to the line 47, and it says, "Here is an Israelite in whom I see no deceit." Or another translation would be, "Here is an Israelite in whom I see no guile or trickery."
Sure.
And then I just kind of felt like this the only thing I could describe it as is like the Holy Spirit or something.
That's very
like some sort of like spiritual blanket was wrapped around me.
Wow, that's really cool, actually. So so you had this premonition, and you found that Bible verse that had applied to you in a way, and that had motivated you now to find more of the Christian faith as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had already been digging into the Christian faith, but that just kind of pushed me a little closer towards it. And not that I disrespect any of the other faiths. I actually think a lot of them are all just getting at the same thing. And it's one of the big reasons is there's this different form of Christianity that was early on in the church. I'm not sure if you know about Gnostic Christianity.
I've heard of Gnosticism, yeah, but not Gnostic Christianity.
That's Gnosticism.
Oh, okay.
And it only existed for the first couple hundred years before, obviously, like the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church kind of consolidated and were like, hey, we can't use your ideas because your ideas take away our church power, so we're just going to kill you all. And so that's what they did.
And there's something to be said about the old usage and mythology of religion, because it was in the old days used as a form of persecution and control. The church had more power than the state. The Pope was the most powerful individual of the time.
The church replaced the Roman Empire. Essentially.
Yeah, the Holy Roman Empire after the Byzantine split, and then the consolidations into the faith after that, and the kingdoms of Europe. So that's all very interesting. With we could backtrack a little bit. So for those that don't know, Gnosticism just means the belief of God. And that was correct.
More specifically, Gnosticism or gnosis just means to know. It's not even belief. It just means to know. It's like the ability to think.
Mm-hmm. So if you are an agnostic, that means that you neither believe nor disbelieve in God. It's kind of like a gray area, a lot of people say in religion. So to be agnostic would be kind of the opposite of that. It is, I guess to the translation is to say to know, but is to believe in a similar way as well. So basically to believe or to think of a creator or to know of. The A is just the opposite. As much as a theist is somebody who, I guess that's the better translation. A theist is somebody who believes in God. A Gnostic is somebody who, by translation, is a knower or knows. So if I'm an atheist, I'm the opposite of a theist, which is it's a very interesting comparison because a lot of people say that atheism is a form of religion when it's the opposite. It's the lack thereof. It's like if there was anything that you could describe atheism as if 10 people in a room had a cup and each had a different liquid, your cup is just empty. Everybody, some has soda, some has water, wine, and those are all different types of religion. But my cup is just empty. I do not have a drink. I do not have a belief. And that's not to say I don't believe in things, but that is to say that my atheism is all the gods that humans have conjured is just that, human conjurations. There's a lot of good morals or good ideologies to follow, or there's a structure of life that's very conducive to success that perhaps the tradition that's been lost is more important to hang on to still withhold. However, there are experiences that I've had that kind of lead me to believe that, if 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago, for the sake of the writing of the Bible, basically, if somebody can just make that up, anybody can make something like that up. So that kind of led me down the pathway of, if it's so easy to just conjure up like a story and say this is what's happened, there's a reason we don't believe in the Greek mythos or the Norse mythos. Nobody, I can't say nobody. I'm sure there's some people that are religious of those mythologies, but it got so commonplace to say that those aren't, and that, because of what really happened in history is that Christianity actually overtook those spots, and so it happened so long ago that the theology changed from, okay, the earth was created by, these beings that are more human, into a centralized power of gods that are not like men but look like us.
I think that one of the weird things about Christianity is it kind of killed itself in its obsession with truth, because that's a main idea of Christianity is like there's the way, the truth, and the life, which is Jesus Christ,
right?
In my opinion.
Well, I think it says in the Bible, or the way pretty much right, the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus Christ, right? Or the light. The way, the truth, and the light.
He's described as the light, but he's also explicitly described as being the life.
Okay, interesting. I mean, yeah, it's a deity.
And there's a couple of quotes I can read off here that that made me think God has to exist. And one of them is by Voltaire, and he said, "If God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him." And I always thought that was kind of a clever, paradoxical statement. So, and kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, there's also the psychologist Carl Jung, and he said, and when asked if he believed in God, he said, "I do not need to believe, I know." And he's not saying like, I do not need to believe in God and I know God exists. What he's saying is, he's like, I don't need the idea of belief because I have the ability to think, to reason, to know.
Sure.
And in the beginning of the book of John,
but does he strictly mean that he believes in the Christian God or just a God?
No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying the power of the mind is more powerful than a belief. And in the beginning of the book of John, John, who was one of Jesus' disciples, is kind of getting at this idea, because he says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Now, the Word sometimes is kind of lost on people because the idea of the Word is not really something many people know about. it's actually the original translation in Greek, because it was written in Greek. The word means logos. Now, I'm not sure if you remember about ethos, pathos, and logos from English class growing up.
I can't say we learned Latin or Greek. I mean, yeah.
Not a. So pathos is like the idea that you can convince someone by appealing to their emotions.
I mean, possibly, dude. I've been out of. I mean, you're not that much younger than me, but I've been out of high school for 7 years. It's been a long time.
Yeah, okay. But basically,
ask me an ice cream question.
The logos is the ability to reason, or as the Greeks believed it, it was divine reasoning or discourse, the ability to like talk like we're doing now. Like we're me and you are digging for the truth right now. We're searching for something. It's just we're using our ability to think to figure out what is real and what is not real. And so another way you could look at the beginning of the book of John is, in the beginning was the brain, and the brain was with God, and the brain was God.
I could find that interesting, but just as well, I don't know if you've noticed the exact language that you've been using, especially from Voltaire. He said it was a bit of a paradox.
It's that life's a paradox, isn't it?
It could be said. But in my point, what I'm trying to say is, if somebody is saying that it comes from the mind, it can be fabricated from the mind. Because just as well, if you're going to choose a religion, that means you have to dismiss a lot of other religions. You can make any argument for or against a religion. It's very easy to. But it's almost impossible to argue for a religion using facts outside of what's been offered through a holy book. And it's good to know that there's other things, and I was thinking of this earlier, that Jesus Christ is probably regarded as the most important historical figure ever. So there's plenty of information to be found about him. Just as well, and this isn't something that I necessarily confide in, but it is historically inaccurate, or at least has been. And I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not any of that. I can't say with certainty, so we're going to preface it with such. That some historians argue that Jesus was a multiple of people, or that he did not exist as a single individual, or that the helm of Jesus was worn by, whoever had decided to write the book. Not like actually write the Bible, but whoever wanted things to look good knowing that it would be written down, basically acting. And this isn't to say that Jesus doesn't exist, or, for myself, I could say that, there's challenges that could be found for the efficacy of that research, perhaps. Sure, that's just how I am as a person. I'm not going to say one thing is one way if I don't have all the facts. This is somebody who died 2,000 years ago, if he even existed, so that's a rough thing to evaluate nowadays. What I'm getting at is that for one religion to say that I believe in my God without using your religious text is very difficult, especially if it's not confounded with another set of ideals. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
If you don't have a basis of understanding, then your religion is going to look very different. And it's a dangerous thing to assume a religion without having an underlying morality to yourself.
Yeah, and for me, believing and I guess surrendering myself to Jesus Christ, to sound like some fundamentalist Christian right now.
I mean, you can say that's no problem at all.
It took me 5 years to convince myself of that, because I very much did not want it to be true, and every time I did something wrong or did something right, and just sort of look at how the world reacted, and how other people acted, and how I acted, and what I thought and what other people thought, it just kept pointing to this guy Jesus. I mean, for Christ's sake, time literally restarted. We stopped tracking time how we normally did, and we said, all right, it's now been 2,024 years since Jesus existed or was around. It's like,
right,
he was so profound, or at least the idea of him was so profound.
Right,
and even without the books, I believe the world is fundamentally chaos and order. It is things we know and we don't know. It is light or the absence of light. It's good and evil,
Well, there's a lot to be drawn from the assumption that everything is a classification in two parts. One can either be, that's like saying everything in the universe is either made out of leather or not made out of leather. Of course, it's such an.
I think that's. Sorry,
it's true. To use your exact logic to say that, but I could agree with you, so I'm not going to say for this discussion. But just as well, if you have any type of comparison that can be drawn, it's very easy to classify things to fit your bias in a certain way. I'm not criticizing you in whatever regard. I'm just saying it's very interesting because you have like an opposite approach entirely. For the majority of my life, I was in religion, and I felt like it was so like secondary to how I was going to promote myself in life, how I wanted to be living. And the idea that something else kind of has to take over for you to really, be yourself, that doesn't really make sense to me. If you need an external stimuli or some type of influence to be like, now I am complete, now I am my person.
I find it very interesting though how you're saying how we're literally coming at this from very opposite directions, and it made me think not of Christianity but of Taoism, where I was like, this guy's the yin to my yang,
That's kind of funny. Yeah.
And for me though, what I was saying earlier, fundamentally the world is chaos and order. It is unknown things and known things.
Right, but the thing is, that's so easy to say, right? It's easy to say that everything that I don't know is...
It's easy to say because I believe it's the truth. It's just, perception-wise, it's like, I know what's in front of me right now. I know I'm looking at a painting in my room, and I might remember that there's like a dresser behind me, but I can't see it, so I don't really know until I turn my head.
Right, and that's like, the trust versus faith argument is if you trust if something's there and it's not, do you have faith that it'll be there when when you return? And that the use of the word faith is not, it's very dissimilar from the practicing, it's two definitions of, one is the faith that, it's like trust, similar to trust. And then there's faith, which is a noun, the faith, a faith, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. So it's really just the language difference, which is like because what you're saying is these are a lot of the same arguments that can be used against organized religion or against the belief or the notion to believe in religion. That's why I find it so interesting for like the dichotomy of, because the arguments, especially with Voltaire was a heretic. He died an atheist. I think he was asked to renounce God, I think he was asked to renounce Satan.
He was asked to renounce Satan, and he said, "Now is not the time to be making enemies."
Absolutely. So with that in mind, right? So and that's
I don't think that really is a renouncing of. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. So with that in mind, no, that's fine. Yeah, with that in mind. It's interesting for you to kind of see that and then think, or not like that specific quote, but what you had said about the paradox, about how you kind of have to like concede a little bit to even believe in religion. And it's with that like, yeah, I agree, but it's on the same level of if he considered Satan to be a power and a power along the lines of another religion, that's just one more religion that because there are people that worship Satan and there are people that are Satanists that don't even believe in an actual physical Satan. So, there's differences between itself, the own religion of Satanism that is that. But the problem is, it's when you use the same language that you come to a different conclusion that at the end of the day, like, it's all the same things. It's just a different consideration. So it's like saying you came at it from one way and you kind of carried a bias with you. And whether it be the opposite bias to me or not, we came to the opposite conclusions using the same evidence. And that's why it's important to have these discussions. Because at the end of the day, what you saw and what I saw were the same things. Our perception was the same. But we took it differently because of our perception as a person, as our understanding of ourselves and what we think the world is.
Yeah, there's obviously an objective reality, and there's things we've seen, but I believe our perception of the thing, we did not see the same thing because our brains influenced us in such a way because of the ideas we've collected.
Right,
to the extent
how
we interpret that what we saw.
Right, to the extent of if you see blue, and your brain processes it. I will never understand what blue looks like through your eyes. Your blue could be red, and it could actually be like if I look through your eyes and I saw that, I was like, that is the color red, but my eyes, it is blue. It is simply our perception and our senses, and we're helpless to that. So we have to concede to the reality of what's the easiest thing to either dismiss or believe at the time being, whatever's convenient. And that's the trap a lot of people fall into. They believe whatever's convenient.
Here's a mild tangent.
Go for it. Your turn, Aidan. Let's hear you.
I forget exactly what country it was. It's some country in Africa, but they have like a bunch of different versions of the color green, like way more than we do in the English language. And okay. When they were shown the color green, there was like two like very mildly different shades of green.
Yeah.
And when Americans were asked like, what color is this? They were like, that's green.
Yeah.
But like when the Africans were asked, they had so many different variables, and they were able to identify it like explicitly, like so quickly.
Yeah, it's like Eskimos and snow. They have different words for different types of snow.
The different snow because it was something they needed. But kind of jumping back to what you were talking about faith earlier, I have a couple quotes.
Sure.
One of them is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he has a good quote I like on faith. If I could just pull it up.
Go for it.
Just 1 second. He says, our faith comes in moments. Our vice is habitual, which I think everyone can relate to that, at least in the sense of like there are things that we do in life that we constantly do over and over again, and we're like, why do I keep doing that?
Smoking, drinking coffee,
and it seems
gambling.
like just holding on to this thing that we think is going to fulfill us, and actually letting go of that and just trusting in whatever force will move us forward in life, whether that's our faith in ourselves or our faith in some higher power.
Yep.
It's very strange, and the Christians actually define faith in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Faith is defined as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Yeah. So I have faith that my dresser is behind me because I know that I have a dresser in my room, but I can't see it because I'm not looking at it right now. You know?
So that would and that's the faith versus trust, which is your perception versus your reality, which is that's very that quote pretty much built on what I said, like pretty much. I agree with that definition of faith, though. I think that's very welcomed, I suppose. What it said about not seeing is very, because to me a lot of faith is just one, hoping, and two, kind of wishing for what you don't see, and then there's like the trust aspect, but
it's more powerful than wishing, though, because it's described as having substance, like it's tangible. You can hold on to it.
Like well, there's substance to be found in people's desires or ambitions for a wish. I wish that my car worked, or I wish that my house was bigger, or I wish this or that.
And those types of desires can often bring disappointment, though. Having faith, though, is something that, at least for me, has been empowering, and it seems to be empowering for other people who
right. And to me, that's kind of the role of religion, is to make people feel better than they would absent from religion. Atheism is a very daunting and I'll be honest with you, it's a horrifying reality. When I have conversations with people,
you were saying earlier. Sorry to interrupt you. You were saying earlier you were making some symbolism about how you have these cups, right? And someone's cup is filled with soda, someone's cup is filled with something else, and you were like
wine, soda, water, whatever.
You said your cup is empty, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, isn't this guy thirsty?
Well, that's the thing.
Don't you want something to drink, man? Otherwise, you're gonna die.
Well, that's the terrifying reality. Is are you going to die with that cup of wine? At some point, am I going to die with my cup of nothing? Yes, maybe sooner.
I think you'll die faster with a cup of nothing, to be honest.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
To drink,
and so
we're thinking symbolically.
Right, but it's with that in mind, and to continue the symbolism, it's with that in mind that if I wanted fulfillment in life to where I feel like I needed my cup filled, there would be plenty of people willing to share.
You mean someone to fill your cup, you mean?
Right, absolutely. And that's how religion kind of is.
That's beautiful. That's I agree with that.
And the thing is, for me, it's scary because people, one, they think you're alone. There's a lot of people that have, but here's the thing for me. And this is why some people use the word agnostic atheist when they describe themselves, which is a little bit of a oxymoron to say you're kind of a non-believer, right? That's like saying I'm sort of breaking the law. It's like, okay, well, you are or you're not. There's one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So to be an agnostic atheist is when people ask me a question I don't have the answer for, that I can say I know no one can answer, and that is, what happens when we die? Somebody asked me this. I was actually in downtown selling ice cream, and I was on the news, so somebody came down. He was trying to convert me. That's literally why he came down. He told me he saw me on the news, and he wanted to share his faith with me, so he came down. Didn't even buy ice cream from me. Really weird guy. We talked about some stuff. He didn't even believe that Mars existed, so that was quite the conversation. I'm dead ass. I'm being serious.
That's funny.
So secondary to that, he said, what happens when you die? And I was like, I don't know. I've never died. And he was like, wait, that doesn't answer. And I was like, what do you want me to say? Like, I haven't died yet, so I don't know. And everybody who has died has shut up after that. So nobody was able to tell us if they're, But then there's experiences like even the Pope this year, he had surgery, and he said when he was, he like literally died, his heart stopped beating. He said when he awoke and he was actually afraid because he thought he would see God in a moment like that, and he didn't. Does that mean there's no God, or does that mean that his experience did not bring him to heaven? That's, who's to say? But we'll never have that answer.
I would say the latter, but that's my opinion.
Sure, yeah, but that's the thing. You will never know. I will never know. And especially for that example alone, his perception is all that he needed to challenge his faith a little bit to say, okay, whatever happened is whatever happened. Hopefully, there is a real God, or else, I'm putting on for nothing. But, that's not the point. The point is, if something is so, if something is so impossible to answer, then why spend time worrying about it? And better yet,
I have an answer.
Give 1 second. Why adopt the judgments of a faith or the necessity to judge others from a faith simply because you need a satisfying answer that doesn't matter until you die?
Yeah. So the question is, what happens after we die? Right?
Yeah, I suppose.
My answer is life goes on.
In what regard?
It just continues.
How do
You're
you know?
dead, and then other people live.
Have you been able to confirm this in any way?
Well, I've seen other people die around me, and I'm still alive, so.
That only proves that at some point living turns into death, and you can expect yourself to no longer be alive. I can understand that there's a hope or there's a concern for what happens.
I'm not saying there's an afterlife.
I'll be honest with you, man. Just as well, it would be cool. It would be hot diggity if there was an afterlife, because for my perception or my understanding of things as it stands right now, that's it. So you got to live a good life, because in 90 some years you won't have one anymore. And that's, that's a really big, hard pill to swallow, that, yeah, really the only thing that matters in life is what you do. So be good to other people and, try to promote happiness. That's pretty much the biggest message of, like, if I had anything to say to somebody who was going through hard times, or if they were seeking religion, or if they wanted help in a philosophical way, I would kind of sit them down, and that would be the basis, is you need to live your life. And if you need things like religion to feel good while you're living, then sure, by all means, that's why it exists. But don't get so wrapped up in religion to where that is your life, because then you live to die. And I have people in my life, I have family in my life that are living to die. And they've disregarded all their earthly possessions, myself being one of those things, because it's more important for them to value the hypothetical reality of heaven than it is to value the one they're living with every day. And that's difficult. Yeah.
It's life's a paradox, man. It's very strange.
Life is strange, yeah.
And I have some quotes from the Gnostic Gospels, which are the rejected books from the Bible. But they supposedly stem from the original 12 disciples, or some of them. And
I thought there was 13. I thought there was 13.
Oh, yes, 13. I forget because there was Judas, and then there's the guy who replaced Judas, and I forget what his.
I didn't know they
replaced Judas.
Look, I honestly, at some point, I will read the entire Bible. I know a lot of it because I was raised around it. We went to Sunday school every Sunday, But just as well, I also have friends that are. I have a friend. I'm not gonna say his name, but if he's watching, he knows who he is. My good friend. Where they're Muslim, and dude, I got to see a lot of cool stuff, like just through the guise of like Islam and like how that kind of community works and how that religion functions. It's very interesting, because you got to remember when we were growing up in the early 2000s, 2010 era, Islam was like akin to terrorism, and I don't feel that way at all.
Very vilified.
Exactly. Growing up in the early 2000s in America, post 9/11, Islam was akin to Satanism, or worse. So, or like I said, or worse. But his sister is both what is the word for both if it's all three? She is a Muslim, she is a Jew, and she's a Christian. Because Jesus is a part of all three of those faiths. Jesus was a Jew. He's the deity of...
Jesus is rejected by Judaism, and in Islam, Jesus is not considered to be the son of God.
Right, but Jesus is a prophet of Islam. Yeah, he might not be the son of God in Islam, but he is a prophet of Islam. So they still believe he was a person, and they still have worship for him. So at the end of the day, here's the thing. Like, if everything revolves around Jesus being a person, the Jews... that's the one thing, though, is I don't have as much experience with Judaism, and I would love to find somebody who I could have a more in-tune conversation about that with. Obviously, grew up as a Christian, have plenty of information from Christianity. Got to speak to my friend very vibrantly about Islam, his family, as well as siblings. So I feel like the only thing that I don't have a good scope of is Judaism. But just as well, for the idea that Jesus Christ was a person and that all these religions kind of like developed around... Well, Judaism is actually the oldest religion. It developed a long time before Jesus was even born.
If thinking in video game terms, it's like
wait, what?
It's like the Torah or the Old Testament is essentially just like the first video game, and then like Christianity is like the OS update.
It's like it's the SNES of the...
Jesus was like the day one patch of
I think
of all the faults of Judaism, I guess.
I'm pretty sure that the Genesis of the Bible and the Genesis of the Torah are pretty much like verbatim the same thing. Because
I know there's a couple books that are excluded, I think, from the Torah or included that are included in the Old Testament. Again, I don't have a Torah, and so I'm not.
Yeah,
sure.
I have ambitions
I knew more about it.
Yeah, I have ambitions to read all the holy books. Just because I want to become more worldly, and I want to have more respect for people that I don't understand. Because even the respect that people can't afford to me because of the the intricacies of their life, I'll say, I would still like to afford the lack of judgment towards that person simply because I understand them a little better without actually knowing them.
Yeah, I want to start tackling other books too. I have the Dhammapada, which is a religious text from Buddhism, and I also have the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu religious text.
That's very interesting.
Very, very. I'm a little scared.
Why?
To read them, just because the ideas are so foreign, and a little daunting.
Sure. Is there any chance that you feel, if you explore other religions, that you will feel judged by a god? What do you mean, like judged by like a different god, or by just that? Yeah, whichever god you confide in. Do you worry that exploring other religions will displease them in some way, or that is that where maybe some of your concern can be sourced from?
I could say maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
And also mayhaps. Perchance.
It's kind of an underlying thing
It's also just like I at least know with like Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, these are all ideas I've grown up with like a lot, just hearing about it because there are a lot of them, a lot of followers in America. But it's just, I just feel like I'd lose a lot of, without like a primary teacher or like someone who is Buddhist or is Hindu
Yeah.
to like help me understand what their line of thinking is. I feel like I might misinterpret it if I'm reading it just for myself.
I agree. I could agree with that, but I would yeah.
I kind of wanted to get back because we got on that tangent. We were talking about Gnosticism, and I wanted to read a couple Gnostic.
Yeah, really quick. As always, today's episode and all future episodes in the In When You're Out podcast are brought to you by Socks with John. Socks with John. We have a saying that somehow came about, which I'm happy because I've been doing this for over a year now, which is, I'm John and here's the socks. You can't see them, but I'll post the video later. Right now, it's just got to do some editing, and then you can see it on YouTube Shorts as well. Check us out on TikTok. Everybody else who's been out there, Socks with John. All right, Aidan, let's get back into it. Tell us a little bit more about Christian Gnosticism.
Okay, so we kind of touched on it earlier, but the whole idea of Christian Gnosticism, or just Gnosticism, is it's self-knowledge. It's the search of knowing yourself. It's the whole idea is to achieve gnosis, which is a state of knowing, of knowing where you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and just feeling fulfilled. It's achieving the flow state, essentially, is the goal of Gnosticism. And there's some quotes that I really love from the Gnostic Gospels. This one is from the Gospel of Philip.
Yeah, go for it.
And it says, God consumes man. Egos are sacrificed before him. Animals were sacrificed to those who weren't God. Huh. And the animals is in reference not to animals, but to humans who are akin to animals.
Yeah.
You see this every day where people are just like living like automated lives, like sort of like how some animals are, like where they're just like consuming and not.
This is a gross example.
Creating.
Right. This is a gross example. But dogs are programmed to eat, so they will eat until they throw up, and then they will eat that throw up. Mm-hmm. So it is, there's a separation of, you lose your humanity and you surrender to nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea that God consumes man and egos are sacrificed before him. Like, you have to humble yourself in order to know God, in my opinion.
Interesting, yeah.
And yeah, so that one I really like. And there's also this quote from the Sophia of Christ, which is a Gnostic text.
Okay.
And Bartholomew, also known as Nathaniel from the Bible, he asked, why are you called the Son of Man? Who is father to this son? And the Savior replied, primordial archetypal man is creative, self-perfected wisdom. And I'm like, well, that's pretty
wisdom.
Primordial archetypal man is creative, self-perfected wisdom. And that's essentially, I think, what makes humanity so different from animals, is that we're trying to achieve something. We're trying to live up to an ideal. Like, every person, every human being holds something in a highest regard.
Well, we have intention. And animals usually don't have intention. They just have desire.
Yes. Yeah, they have like a
instinct.
An instinct, yeah. And humanity kind of is very strange because they can reject their instincts and make plans for the future.
So I do have a good question for you, and I'm sure more recently possibly this has changed for you, but maybe not. So obviously, a lot of the things that I base my understandings, I'll say, of the world, or my lack thereof belief, or my atheism, I base them off of the scientific notions of discovery through how old the Earth is. So by that I mean the carbon dating of rocks and the proof of fossils that show that there was life that existed throughout, millions and billions of years ago. Do you believe, or do you rather accept, that the Earth is about 4.3 billion years old and that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old?
Yeah, I know that for a fact. Yeah.
Now, so with that in mind, so you know that for a fact, how does that align with your religious views of hoping to accept the truth of the Bible? You said, I remember in the beginning, that the New Testament to you is not necessarily based in reality. It's more a teaching environment. It's more just like the
Well,
understanding of what a religious person should be like.
Yes and no. The Old Testament, I think, is more that, as in, like, there's so many different stories, and each of those stories has different lessons in each of them. Because I view life as a story.
Sure.
Life is a series of myths and weird stuff. But to me, I kind of view the New Testament with a lot more validity than the Old Testament, because
Sure.
it's more recent. Obviously, like, people will believe that Alexander the Great existed, but they'll say no, Jesus Christ didn't exist, and that to me is very silly. If there's
Well, I mean, if I could understand where you could find that to be silly. To play devil's advocate is important to do. The difference.
Funny terminology there.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Devil's
exactly.
advocate.
Hilariously enough, when comparing two things, but the juxtaposition of a military leader who has influenced the trajectory of human history, he never did anything that no man could do. He never turned the basket of fish and bread into food for hundreds or thousands, what it was, water to wine. These things are miracles, and so it's with that if we can't recreate it today, there's a good chance that probably didn't happen then without the real intervention of God. So unless unless that actually happened, that's how I can understand why some people feel more inclined to believe that Alexander the Great was a historical figure I guess, versus Jesus Christ being a real historical figure.
Yeah, the whole the absurdity of the miracles is kind of I can understand why people reject that, and that's why I rejected it initially growing up. As just being like, well, nobody can do that. Nobody has magic powers.
Right. I mean,
there's a moment in the Bible which I love, actually, where Jesus, some group of people come up to Jesus and they're like, "Give us another sign, give us a miracle," and and he says, "Without signs and wonders, you people will never believe." And he also says at one point, when people are asking and begging him for a sign, oftentimes he would just reject it. But in this case, he says, an evil and adulterous generation looks for a sign, but the only sign I give to you is the sign of Jonah, which is one of the books of the Bible.
Yeah, the whale.
Where he goes into the belly of the whale. And to me, the lesson of that story is there are things that you should be doing that you're not doing, and you know that you should be doing them, but you choose to run away from your responsibility. And so that's funny how Jesus is like these people, they want signs to reaffirm their faith in him, and he's like, no, how about you just do the good thing,
I see where there's validity to be drawn from that specific story. However, what you brought up, I think it's very interesting to use that as an example, because one, the story of Jonah and the whale, from my understanding, and I saw the VeggieTales special as well. I mean, we talked about Jonah and the whale. It's very popular during Sunday school. So basically, I'll ask you that. Do you believe that Jonah was eaten by a whale, forgiven by God in the stomach, and then regurgitated?
I have to say, yeah.
You do believe that?
As ridiculous as it sounds, it's like there's just something in my soul, for lack of a better term, that just tells me, even though these crazy things just seem like something out of a fantasy novel, there's even if maybe they didn't really happen, the lesson is so profoundly true.
So that's where I
can't reject it.
Right, that's kind of where I was going with it next, is it more important to kind of have a hypothetical story that teaches a lesson versus actually have historical evidence of something happening? Because Sorry,
can you repeat that?
Is it more important to have a lesson with a hypothetical situation that may or may not have happened versus is it more worthy to have historical context that provides the actual reality of the situation? We create hypotheticals constantly to get our point across. Do you believe that that's what Jesus was doing in that scenario? As you just expressed, it's probably not true, or that's probably not how you feel, because you believe that Jonah was swallowed by a whale, forgiven by God in the stomach after speaking to angels, I think it was, and then regurgitated. And what was the town they went to, or the city?
He had to the Nineveh, I think.
Nineveh.
He had to go preach at Nineveh, is what he was.
Yeah, but then he got scared. Then very interesting. But I think those are more so. Possibly could actually have happened, but the historical evidence is so bare.
To answer your question, I would say that the lessons are important.
So it's more important to have the lessons than to actually have the historical context. So if that's if that's how you
it's kind of what I was getting at earlier about like how people believe in Alexander the Great, but they don't believe in
right. But
we don't have physical photos of these people, so it's like. And to me, it's kind of like a redundant thing to argue about anyways. It's like, why bother?
Well, and that's kind of the whole point is it worth it? Is it worth having the conversation? Is it worth entertaining these thoughts if at the end of the day they didn't actually happen? It's just to tell a story or to teach a moral.
I think we're here right now talking about it, so I'd say, it's worth entertaining.
I think it's worth
entertaining for the audience.
Sure, yeah, I think it's worth entertaining, and not just entertaining in the way of like it's nice, it's cool, so I want to see more of it. Entertaining in the way of I'm finding time for it and allowing its company. So I think it's important to share stories, but it's also important to understand that sometimes the story is just there to teach a moral and didn't always happen. Do you remember the storybook Stone Soup?
I do not know.
Oh, okay. Well,
sorry.
No, it's an old fairy tale. Basically, a beggar or somebody who is like a peasant, think of like feudal times, goes to a house and convinces this lady that he has a secret recipe for the most delicious soup in the world. And what he does is basically coaxes her into putting stones into the soup, because he calls it stone soup. And the way he does it is he tells stories to kind of distract her, which at the end of the day, he just wanted her to feed him. So he's getting her, I have the best way of doing something ever. Let me show you how it's done so you can enjoy this. And wow, thank you for teaching me that. But at the end of the day, it's just about getting what he wanted. So he tells these stories, he gives these examples, and there's a lot of morals to be found in these stories as well. There's a lot of teachings to be had. It's stories about how mountains grew, or the mountains had turned into rocks, and how they, they personified and characterized the actual rocks as living things that could speak to each other. Not the ones that are in the soup, but the ones that he was telling the story about. And so at the end of the book, he says as he's leaving, like, how silly is it to make stone soup? Like, how ridiculous to make stone soup? But at the end of the day, that lady had a good time with him. He got fed, and he shared his knowledge. Whether it be worthy knowledge or not, he coaxed that lady into having that time with him. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do with religion. They coax them into hearing their stories so that they can teach their lessons, even though in the back of their mind they might not think that story's true. The lesson is more valuable than the historical credibility of the story. Could you find that to be true?
Yes, but also it's kind of like the stories are there, so it doesn't really matter anyways.
I mean,
and the lessons are there. So to me, it's like truth is like, it's so weird because there's different versions of truth, and I'm not saying like that truth is like negotiable or anything, but it's like there's different layers to it, I guess is what I'm saying.
There's
it's
okay.
It's what's the thing I'm thinking of? It's if an animal is like out in the wild and it believes that there's a lion hiding in a bush,
okay,
and so it runs away, but there was no lion in the bush, the animal lives and it gets to produce more offspring, and that in turn will allow their offspring to produce more offspring because it can survive, because even though there wasn't really like a lion hiding in the bush, that mindset will keep them living,
Right, and that
when there actually is a lion in the bush, when there is like a predator coming after them.
And I think that's a good parallel to draw between religion and fear. How if you have fear but you have faith, that's usually regarded as a good thing in religion. But if you have faith, or if you have, what did I say first? Fear without faith or faith with fear? Basically, at the end of the day, somebody can have as much faith that there's a lion in there and as much fear that there's a lion in there, and they can go on and better their life heading south, but if they went north through those bushes, they find the utopia that's been hiding behind their fear from faith. And so just as well as faith can be used to embolden and steer us in ways that otherwise might be daunting, it can also blind us in ways of overlooking that which might be best for us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, fear definitely can hold us back. But in the Bible, it also says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
I was going to say,
and I guess,
right.
And I guess that to me is kind of another reason why I turned to Christianity, is because
that's so interesting.
It's like if there is an afterlife, I don't want to be the guy who's going to hell.
Well, that's Pascal's wager, which is a really old argument, which is it's more advantageous, or it's, there's a better chance. Say if there's a 50-50 chance that there is or is not a God, it makes more sense to believe in a God, because the ramifications of not believing in God and there actually being a God are greater than believing in a God and there not being a God. Because if you believe in God and there is none, you die, and you die like everybody else. But if you but if you don't believe in God and there is a God, then you burn for eternity. So
yeah, that's kind of.
However,
that's kind of how I think.
Right. However, Aidan, it's a fallacy. And it's a fallacy because there are more than one religions that exist on this planet. Because just as well, and just as Voltaire had said, this is not the time to be making new enemies on his deathbed after he was asked to denounce Satan. Because
I think that's him just living out what Jesus taught, because Jesus...
Voltaire was not a man of faith. Voltaire was an atheist of his time. He was regarded as a heretic. He was regarded as somebody who was against religion. He was a secular man.
He was against the church.
He was against... Okay. They're mostly one and the same.
I don't believe he was really against religion.
I'm sure the notion of religion was more appealing than the demonstrations of religion at the time, when you're burning people to death for thinking differently. I'm sure that religion might sound good when it's, saving, populations of people from slavery, but that's not so much happening anymore versus what people are using in justifications of their faith in modern day equations versus Voltaire's time.
Yeah, I don't know if it was on the recording, but before we get started, I had mentioned, I dislike organized religion greatly, because it allows for silly, stupid things like the unfortunate Spanish Inquisitions and the burnings of the Gnostic people. They were one of the first people subject to burnings on the stake. If you didn't know that, by the church. The church burned.
The Gnostic Christians, the first persecuted their own Christians, and then later in times, before the church became the church, the Druids of the Franco-European area, which was modern day France to Germany and the United Kingdom as well. The Druids of the forest were basically completely genocided. They were wiped out, and that was a nature worship. That was akin to paganism. So that's a demonstration of organized religion, being destroyed purely because of a difference in ideology. Which at the time, the Druids... Tell me how much you know about, or how much you've heard about, Druidic religions.
I'm going to say I don't really know too much.
And the reason for that is because the history has been destroyed, and purposely so. Actually, a lot of my...
And the same thing with the Gnostics.
Yeah, 100%. With my heritage, where I come from, I'm very English, Italian. So my last name is Swedish, so I have a lot of family that's in Swedish and Norwegian, or North. I guess it's all just Scandinavian, but anyway. And outside of that, I'm very Irish, Italian, and kind of Central European, which is France and whatever else. Anglo-Saxon, basically. I'm a white dude. And a lot of my heritage comes from there. And I could even say that at that time, that's probably who my people were. My ancestors were most likely the Druids of the forest during the... I don't have a time period, so I'm not even going to try. I want to say the anywhere between the 300s to the 500s AD. but that's
pretty
more.
cool.
Yeah, that's not like super relevant information. But yeah, basically, yeah. So I can agree
very
with that as
sad.
well. It is sad, but it's happened so long
to
ago.
lose all that history.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
well, you want to be
makes
really
me so
sad. Worry
sad.
about the burning of the Library of Alexandria. That was probably one of the worst
Dude,
things that happened.
every day I mourn the Library of Alexandria. Every
People
day
say, I mean, but think about it like this. The differences that happened in history from there, if you can consider the butterfly effect, that was like 1,000 years ago. Or more than 1,000 years ago, maybe. I can't get the exact date. I don't remember. I don't have the ability to look it up right now. So we're going to go with a general idea. But anyway, is that the trajectory of human history would change so much that you and I would maybe never be alive. Our parents would never meet, or our parents' parents, or their parents' parents. So we can never really say. Yeah. So it's interesting that.
So this is going to be a little minor tangent.
Go for it.
Have you seen Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix?
I want to say maybe because everything sounds like that on there. Like I've seen some videos like that, ancient something, ancient whatever. So maybe.
You should, if you haven't seen it, after this, I would recommend on Netflix looking up Ancient Apocalypse. It sort of leans into this idea that human history is a lot older than we think, and that we've lost a great deal of it.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead on your tangent.
I think right now the idea is like civilization kind of started in like the Mesopotamian area, but we keep finding more and more archaeological sites that are older and older. And so there's definitely something in human history that we are missing out on.
Have you ever heard of the unknown unknown? So
the idea that like we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know.
We don't know. We don't know what we don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example,
that scares me.
Yeah, just an example for our listeners or our viewers today. So, think for example, Pompeii. When Mount Vesuvius erupted and they covered in ash, obviously they were able to see a lot of evidence of that volcanic eruption, and there was plenty of artifacts to be found from Pompeii to show, there was a volcanic eruption. Okay. So, say for example, what we will never find, what we know we'll never find. We open this one place and there's all these books, or not books, say pottery. There's a lot of pottery. And it's all filled with a substance and we don't know what it is. It could be wine, it could be this or that. We're not sure. Maybe it's a recipe, maybe they're in the process of something. We just don't know. However, maybe the truth of the reality is it's like some totally like had no idea. Maybe they're like dyeing clothes, doing this or that. And maybe they're dyeing clothes for somebody's birthday that they celebrate every single year, but they don't have any evidence of that. That's the unknown unknown. What if the person that they're celebrating is a very high esteemed person, and so he's like valuable to their civilization? We don't know because we don't even have the context to understand that person existed, let alone what their activities in life were. So that information is not just gone, it's erased forever because we don't know what we don't know, and we'll never find that. We have to reverse time, and that's impossible, so... It's terrifying, 100%. And that's not like even the most scary of example. A scarier example would be like if the foundations of writing were found in like some civilization, and like we found something that like changed our entire perception of human history, but we didn't have enough information to make like a real solid like designation of what happened. Then we're gonna have to either disregard it or make an assumption, which is equally dangerous.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
So indulge me for a second.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time, and not like change the course of history, but just go back in time and just be like the term, the fly on the wall, and just observe a certain period of history or a certain series of events, like what spot in history would you go to? Like where would you want to? There's a
lot of places I could say. I'm not going to give you one answer. I'll give you a couple because
okay.
I think there's plenty of places to go. One, I'm not going to say it's the top of the list. It's just the first that came to mind, really. The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand would be very interesting to see. If I had any ability to see the suicide of Hitler, that would be because we have very little information about that. Nuremberg trials would be crazy. The last Queen concert would be pretty cool too. But as for historical context, to be honest, it would be absolutely impossible. We're talking in impossibilities anyway. But it would probably be the formation of life on this planet, I would see. That would be the most important thing for me to actually see and collect evidence of.
So, when you say formation of life, do you mean like cellular life, or
Yep.
it's just like
I'm talking, but yeah,
you want to go back to when Earth was just like
it would be
fucking primordial soup.
Yep, primordial soup Earth. It would
just,
be the nanobacteria that developed on the volcanic vents at the bottom of the seafloor, and that would be pretty
you have
impossible.
to bring a microscope, dude.
Yeah, I mean, if I have a time machine, I probably have a microscope.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Okay, and I find it very fascinating that you the first three that you listed were like relating to the world wars.
Well, we live in the aftermath of the first two world wars and the New World Order.
I was talking to my mom about that just yesterday about how there's so much generational trauma, especially for men.
Yeah.
About for the repercussions of the World War and why. And I think I was listening to a little bit of your last podcast and how men are unable. They don't have the tools for talking about their feelings a lot of the time.
Most of the time,
I believe that is because of the World Wars, because it was so traumatizing for those people.
And it's not just, I would say more so we live in the aftermath of the Korean War and Vietnam War, because the people that are veterans from the, well, there are no World War I veterans. The war had gone on too long ago. It's over 100, when was it? 1919 was the last. So
the forgotten generation.
Yeah, over 100 years ago. So all those people, there's no chance that you would have to be, say you were like 14, you like snuck into the army. You would have to be 101 if you're 14. Then, so it's impossible. Not impossible, but, or no, you'd have to be much older than that. We're not going to do the math because I'm so bad at like doing math on the fly, I found. Anyway.
Me too, man. I'm not a math guy.
Yeah, but yeah, I would say that the veterans from World War II, they kind of brought home a lot of trauma, but I would say the majority of the people are, well, okay, the people that face trauma are usually those that are younger. So if they're like, say when you're born to like 10 or 15 is when you kind of like start to lose your influence from your parents. If you live in their house, yeah, maybe until you're like 20 or so, but they don't really get to say what you do after a certain age, hopefully. So for abuse cycles, it's most of the people that have PTSD from the Vietnam War or the Korean War. The Korean War was 1952 to 1958. And the Vietnam War, I think, was 1960, or, oh man. People are going to either flambe me or, all I know is that it ended in 1975. The Korean War officially ended in 1975. It was a year before my father was born. So that's how I know. My dad's going to be 48 tomorrow, by the way. So that was 49 years ago that the Vietnam War ended.
It never really officially ended. It was just an armistice, right?
Not the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was never...
sorry. I thought you were saying the Korean War. My bad.
No, Korean was 52 to 56, and the Korean War was about 54 to 56,000 Americans died, and I think it's about 190,000... casualties for Vietnam. That doesn't mean deaths, that just means casualties. But the reason I'm saying this, the comparisons you can draw to modern day conflict like the Ukraine war, it's been said that in the past, so it was February 24th, 2022 was the beginning of the Ukraine war, and they say that the estimate is over 600,000 Russian lives alone have died, like lost their life. Not casualties, not injured, not wounded, dead. Which is more people that have died in any war outside of the two major wars, World War I, World War II, combined. Not true. Civil War.
It's wild.
The Civil War had the most casualties for any American or any war ever. Over 900,000 Americans died because it's a civil war, obviously.
It was exclusively Americans for the most part.
And in World War II, over 400,000 Americans died. Over 400,000.
And kind of touching on World War II and then I'm going to tie this back into our religion discussion.
Sure.
So Hitler, when he was growing up, he read Friedrich Nietzsche, right?
Okay.
And Nietzsche had this idea that God is dead. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's his famous quote, right? That's his most known quote is "God is dead."
Interesting.
And I don't know how much do you know about Nietzsche? Do you know a lot or no?
Not really much.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was a philosopher from the time.
Okay.
From like the late 1800s, and
Gotcha.
A lot of people will use this quote, "God is dead." A lot of edgy nihilist people will use this quote as like sort of like triumphant, like we don't need God anymore. He's dead. It's
really quick.
That
I'll tell you what I say. I say that you're in Gen Z. You're like 2 years younger than me. I'll be 25 soon. But I say that God dies with my generation, which is most likely true. There's a majority of people in the United States right now are religious. The dynamic is flipping. More people are becoming secular.
I think he's on the comeback, to be honest. I think God's coming back.
The data suggests otherwise. Is all
Again,
I'll say,
the yin to my yang.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you really have the exact opposite approach of how you were brought into religion. You know, I'm at the point in my life where I went to a baptism today, and I made sure that, you know, I expressed my views in the slightest protests, that being I chewed gum while, you know, somebody was upset that I was chewing gum. But I could give a fuck because I'm not a religious person, and I'm here for my niece, who at the end of the day is not going to remember this. So, you know, but and it's very interesting, the difference of how you got to your religion and where I'm at with, you know, religion as a whole. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. But hold on, I have to mirror your question. Where would you go if you had a time machine? If you can go to any time in history, what would you do?
It would 100% have to be Jesus's his time on Earth when he was the 4-year time span when he's spreading the Gospels, and then his crucifixion and resurrection. And I would just if that's the case and that happened, I would love to see Magic Man running around, performing miracles, healing the sick, and then rising from the dead, and then raising a bunch of other people from the grave.
I mean,
to me, it's like if that's the point in history, either that or when Hannibal crossed the Alps.
The elephants? That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, with the elephants to try and conquer Rome.
Yeah,
one of those two.
That'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, that would be very vindicating to see, you know, if there was actually... But the reason that I didn't say anything in regards to faith, well, one, because I'm an atheist, and, you know, I feel like that'd be a waste of my time if I had that opportunity. But moreover, that's only one religion. So, you know, there's miracles that take place in other religions that... you know, I understand where you are with religion and where your religious landscape kind of, or how it looks, you know, and the gods you entertain and the religion that you like to promote, or at least that you are fascinated with enough to learn more about it.
Yeah, I'm mildly insane because I don't discredit the idea that there could have been a time in human history when there was a lot of magical miracles going on in all religions. Because Yahweh, the God of Judaism.
Well, that's technically
the God of Judaism and the God of Christianity essentially is described as being the God of all gods. He's not really a single monotheistic God. He is the God of all gods. And also another funny thing, one about the word Yahweh. It was Moses, I think, who was on the hill.
So Yahweh is actually a combination. Sorry to cut you off, but so Yahweh, and the worst thing is that I learned this from a damn Rick and Morty episode, is that Yahweh is actually two gods, one of them being Sumerian and one of them being Mesopotamian. Yah and Weh are actually two separate gods that were colloquialized into one form, being Yahweh, which was then rendered by... I guess you said Moses. So, and then after that, you know, it was proclaimed that Yahweh was the God of all gods, the God above all. And, you know, but the thing is, most religions are adaptations or new inventions of adoption of old religions. Paganism is profoundly found in Christianity. And I'll let you go in just a second, but the day of Christmas is actually a pagan holiday. The 25th of December is the winter celebration of the seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why we use the Christmas trees, and that's why we light fires, or, you know, it went from lighting fires to lighting candles to putting candles on trees to putting lights on trees. So we went from, and the fire was not an F-I-R-E, it was a P-Y-R-E. a different type of fire. As a bonfire is a pagan ritual entirely. Like the bonfire, the idea of creating a bonfire is an actual thing. It's not just like putting logs on the ground and lighting that. I'll let you go from here. Sorry if I had taken too much of your time.
No, it's okay. I just have like so many things that I could say that it's just my brain is just like. I'm sure you probably are like this too, where there's like 1,000 different things.
I mean, yeah, there's still some
and
things.
Just like, there's so much that I could touch on.
Right, there's stuff from earlier that I could like rehab. Like one of the things we didn't mention that we never really like completely resolved the conversation over was you had mentioned that Jesus Christ, his life is what we base our calendar system off of. We do that currently. Like now we do that. We use a Roman calendar, which the Romans were during and after.
Good old Julius naming a whole month after himself.
Right. July. We call it the Gregorian calendar, which is based on the phases of the moon.
It was revised by
There was many different calendar systems during that time. And yeah, it's based on the phases of the moon and the rotation of the earth around the sun, which at the time was not something people thought was heretical to say that the sun was not the earth revolved around the sun and not vice versa.
This is why I think you should watch the Netflix show Ancient Apocalypse, because a lot of it touches on ancient astronomy, not astrology, astronomy.
Yeah,
we knew so much more about the stars, and then we lost a lot of that knowledge.
And
because
that
of some cataclysmic apocalypse, like meteor shower.
I would rival that. It wasn't anything like a cataclysmic event. It was just suppression from a modest church, or not even a modest church. That's nice to say. No, it was just religious suppression. That science rivaled religion and undid religious practices. So it was more advantageous to stay in power than to preach the truth. So that's why the church became that.
Religion gave birth to science. So like there's the Islamics who they
well for this definition, what is science in your regard then?
Science, well, it's fundamentally the search for truth through like
evidence-based
what's the word? Evidence. That's what I was going to say. I was going to say like absolute.
It is the search for knowledge with the use of evidence-based research or means. So to say anything is science, anything is science, and that's why it's a little bit of an ignorant thing. I'm not saying you're ignorant for saying this or that what you said was ignorant, but ignorance grows when those that want to contrast religion from other areas of thought use science as, if it's juxtaposed next to science wants to find answers regardless of how you feel. Religion will look for their answers after it's already said what the truth is. Science will wait until you find enough evidence to come to the conclusion of what the truth is versus search for an implicit truth, which is just whatever. That's just up to whoever says, okay, this is what we're looking for. You can always find it if you look hard enough. You know what I mean? For example,
I'm of the mind that religion and science do not actually conflict.
I have to disagree with that sternly, because there's plenty of like I said, if you do carbon radioactive decay to see how much of a carbon sample has decayed into a certain element, you can see how old a certain material is. And if we can see that part of the earth is of a certain age, that begins to disprove the claim in the Bible, which is the earth is of a certain age, less than 6,000 years old, or whatever you say, or whatever they say, I suppose. So I disagree with that.
About like the kind of what I'm saying is like the lessons of religion, and the lessons of science are fundamentally searching for the same thing, which is truth.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I guess you could say. I mean, that's pretty broad. I would say I could agree.
I think broadly. I don't really. I'm be honest. I think on. I'm not trying to sound arrogant or.
No, if that's the truth. That's the truth.
I think on like higher levels of analysis, I despise like numbers and like calculations. So I don't think I'm like the micro. I think macro. I don't really think micro.
I have a kind of a different approach towards that. I'm very analytical, and I understand that the smallest bias or change of tone or how you display information can influence how it's perceived to the extent of it be completely opposite. So when somebody says something like, "Oh, XYZ is true because of what I've seen in the Bible," for me, it's not good enough to say, okay, maybe the lesson comes from that, and I'm not going to say anything. Yeah, maybe I won't say anything. But myself personally, that doesn't satisfy my desire to find out what's really happened. So if somebody says that, you know, and I don't want to use the same example of Sodom of Gomorrah, but I will, that, the woman was, Job's wife was turned to stone. Or is it? No, it's not Job, is it? That's a different story.
Yeah.
Is it Job?
Job's a really sad story in the Bible.
Is Job the one where he loses everything as a test to God? That's like another one that's kind of... to test him.
Job is where God essentially makes a bet with Satan.
Yeah,
he's like, I believe in this man so much that you could do everything to him to ruin his life, and he's still going to love me.
Yeah.
And Satan's like, okay, bet.
and I think that's I think that's a bad example of what Christianity is like, because that's not so. Actually, disregard everything we said so far. I have something I want to propose to you, or at least walk you through, and this is something that I really don't promote to people, or I don't show people, or I don't walk them through this process, because the conclusion that really, it's narrow-minded. It leads you down to basically one conclusion, which I don't think is very appropriate when you're trying to discuss things like religion. There's really no one answer, but it should be a little bit more open-ended. But the thing is, this is ancient in time. It's I want to say his name correctly, the Epicurean paradox. It basically is a step-by-step of, you have, in whatever way you answer, there are always so if you answer this way, this is the response. If you answer this way, and it is pretty ironclad. So I'll walk you through it. It's really easy. It's just off the top of my head, so I don't have to actually read something. It basically starts with just yes or no questions, and then you can go into say whatever you want. But I think the first 3 questions, just say yes or no. So the first question is, does evil exist?
Yes.
Okay. Does God know evil exists?
Yes.
Does God do something when evil exists to stop it from existing? Can God do something?
Yes.
Then why doesn't he? And now you don't have to answer in yes or no.
Because he gives us free will. He allows us to have that choice.
Could we live in a world where we had free will, but also evil did not exist?
Honestly, I'm glad you asked these questions, because this is going to go right back to what I was saying about Nietzsche. Nietzsche has another quote, Friedrich Nietzsche. He says, there is an old illusion. It's called good and evil. I believe that is entirely wrong. That's completely false. And that idea itself is what Hitler read, and it indirectly was the catalyst for him pursuing and persecuting the Jewish people, and using them as the scapegoat for his ascension to power in World War II. And the idea that morality is relative is kind of disgusting to me. And I think relativism is for egotists. It's not sustainable, and without objective morality, society degenerates. And in fact, I don't think it could have formed in the first place if we did not have objective morality.
I could agree that objective morality is important and more so essential to be commonplace in society for it to exist. However, I disagree that evil and good are... sure, it's up to somebody's perception to say, what's good and evil. But I disagree that simply by proclaiming that one thing is, in your terms of definition, good or bad, is a proclamation to those that are supposed to think like you. And to live in a society is to agree enough to live together that you're not going to hurt each other. You have to have concessions in a society. And one of those is you can't live out your perfect moral reality, because there's certain things other people would disagree with that dictate your life, whether you like it or not. And those things are laws, or commonplace taboos that dissuade people from doing things that are more harmful, like incest or rape. There's nothing in the Bible, actually. again, how are we talking about Sodom and Gomorrah the third time? That is specifically there's incest and rape. The two daughters of the man, they get him drunk so that they can have the babies with their father. Sodom and Gomorrah is probably one of the worst stories in the Bible, and it's just rough. We're not really going to get into that so much more. But that's the thing, is if something is just morally apprehensible, that doesn't have any sway with people that just think differently, because you're socialized differently in a different country by different parents that spoke different languages, ate different food, had no idea that you existed in the first place, let alone have enough consideration to think there's a different way of being than strictly adhering to the religion that used to persecute people akin to those of you. So it's with that in mind
we're
really
deep in the rabbit hole. Man.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the thing. I agree with what you said, that there needs to be a moral objectivity, and that we as a society kind of have to agree with each other enough to live with each other, right? But just as well, it's an individual approach that good and evil is through your own perception, and so we agree enough as a human species living on one planet that something is morally apprehensible, and so it shouldn't exist in our society. And those people might not 100% agree 100% of the time. But we, as people, say majority rule is the majority rule. So if enough people want something, we either concede or we fight for it.
Okay, this will seem out of nowhere.
That's fine.
Have you watched Star Wars, like all the movies?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't regard the sequels as actual movies of the franchise. They're just like spin-offs.
I agree. One of my favorite lines from the prequel trilogy, even though the prequels have all their faults.
I love the prequels are my favorite. At least Revenge of the Sith is my favorite.
The idea that George Lucas was getting at with the prequels, I think, was very relates a lot to our American society.
Okay.
But one of my favorite lines from Revenge of the Sith is when Anakin and Obi-Wan are about to fight on Mustafar.
From my point of view, the Jedi are evil. Is that what you're gonna say?
And then
Anakin,
Obi-Wan,
Palpatine is evil. From my point of view, the Jedi are evil. Well, then you are truly lost.
And Obi-Wan says it during this exchange at one point. He says, only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Yeah, which
is so funny and ironic to me, because that statement in and of itself is an absolute statement.
Yeah, only is an absolute.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes, and it's like, that's why the Grey Jedi are cool in Star Wars.
Well, and that does play well, because in the movies, Jedi are a religion. However, it's not so much a religion as it is a practice, because yeah, they have morals, and sometimes that gets in the way of what they want to do. But at the end of the day, it's a real thing. There is the Force. They do have whatever powers, and they use their faith, the exercise of that faith, to do what they want in life. So I think it is a good example.
There's like a force in our reality, like maybe you don't want to call it God, but there's some universe.
I'll put it this way. Give me So I personally, like I said in the past, or in this podcast already, I don't believe that any of the gods that humans have created exist. However, I do believe the definition of God could fit a being or entity that exists in this universe. That is not up to me to determine, because I've never met this person. I'll put it again in a more simpler term. If we are ants, we would see people as gods. However, you and I are not gods. We are just larger ants.
Okay, yeah. I can agree with that, yeah.
So it's...
I can tell just from our conversation that, there's many atheists that I've met who are, and I'm sure that you have met, that are not humble. And they... They like to disregard the notion of God, and then just sort of take the mantle of God and say I know what's right and wrong. I know the truth.
Well, perhaps
you seem very humble, and I respect that very much so about your.
Thank you, man. I mean, like I said, thank you. I came to this not assumption. I came to this the answer basically of, is there a God? Yes or no? Should I continue my walk with God, or continue into faith? I came to that realization on my own. And that was the first time in my life I felt like I was able to understand things based on how I saw them through my own eyes. When you're 12, 13 years old, people tell you what to do, you listen to them because you don't trust yourself
Mm-hmm.
yet. But when you see
Yeah.
stuff online, it just makes enough sense, you know. And then after that, everybody else in my family started challenging their faith and the ideas that we've been brought and socialized with our entire life. And it's once you start to think of things differently and you say, I'm not afraid of going to hell forever just because I don't believe that, or I do believe that dinosaurs exist and that there's evidence that the earth is not as the Bible says it is, you start to feel bad about yourself. And so it's important enough for me to know that I want to feel good regardless of how my religious aptitude is or where my religious aptitude is. But yeah, with other atheists, I've had conversations with. I had a very interesting conversation with a friend
Again,
of
I'll
mine.
also say this: I've had conversations with theists like that too, where they're like, "I know what's right, God. Like I read the Bible, so I know
Yeah.
the truth." It's like, no, we're all just ants.
So
like you said.
yeah, I mean, if you want to use that example, 100%, we're I I don't know if you know, but I'm writing a book. I've been writing a book for a while, and it's deeply encrusted in religion. The book is about an individual. It's an everyman. So the character has no name. It does, but it's not like an actual name. And so I put this character through like the worst of the worst, like bad family life, abused, school is shitty, no friends, bullied, teachers are in on it, like all this terrible stuff, like poor, all that stuff. And it's basically this individual gets the power of God. And the rest of the book, they get it very early on, like chapter 2, they receive the power of God, basically, the all powerful God, like couldn't do anything. The rest of the book is figuring out what kind of God that person wants to be and how to use that power, if to use it at all. And I'll spoil the book for you. At the end of the book, he decides that what he wants is to use his power however he feels. And he admits that he is a hateful person and he has the capacity to hate. One of my favorite lines in the book, it's towards the end of the book. It says, "The God I am is harmful. The God I am is hateful. I am the God of scars and burning scorn. I burn all, what is it? I'm the God of scars of burning scorn. I move with fiery extinction upon all I set to scorch. Rise with me." And for me, that is a very profound way of saying, I don't care anymore. Basically, I'm going to do whatever I want with this power. And I'm not going to spoil much else besides that because I think the book is very good and the story is incredibly rich.
Now, can I ask, is that to you, that final line that you wrote, is that
Oh, it's not the final line, but yeah. What's that?
Or sorry, but is that like a moment of triumph, or is that like a dark?
It's the exact opposite. It's the moment of capitulation, basically where everything is destroyed. It's his.
Okay,
I say his. It's not really, it could be anything, but for this character, that moment of, because they're fighting against another entity, so it's not just like I am God, I'm going to do whatever I want. Yes, that is the truth, but there's more ambition to overcome, or they're not ambition. Yeah, there's more. Perfect. There is more ambition because there's a need to overcome.
There's obstacles in the way.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I don't really want to say too much else. I think you would like the book, honestly.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it. I got you.
But when the character says that, it is towards the end of the book, and everything that happens after that, reality is shattered, basically. So it's interesting because it starts out with, he goes and he beats up the bully. Well, I'll be honest, it happens in like chapter 2, so it's not like a big reveal. But after he attains the power of God, the first thing he does is he goes back to the school and he kills the people that's been bullying him for basically his whole life, his torturers, basically. Like, kills them outright. And his next thing is to go to his house and then kill his parents. But as soon as he has a moment of hesitation, he realizes that he's not strong in that regard, and so he's introspective enough to know that gods that are not strong enough to do what they need to do should not, either one, shouldn't be gods, or two, should become more powerful. And so that's like after that he leaves the house, goes to underneath a bridge, and then he wakes up at night or something, and he starts walking down the sidewalk. And one of the things he says is that he's looking at his hand. I say he, it's not a he, it's just whatever. But they're looking at their hands, and they keep stepping in and out of the light. The street lights are shining on, one sidewalk square, then the next one is dark. Then the next one's illuminated, then the next one is dark. So for that character, they tell themselves, all I have to do is stop along this road, and I make my decision of where I stand, whether it be in the light or the dark. And I thought that was very interesting. But it goes on further about, if you kind of dehumanize what a god is in religion, and you start to realize that, okay, if you want a human to be a god, how would a human act as God? And not just like for the case of my book, but evaluating all religions, especially because
I, this is why I believe in Jesus Christ, is because the idea is that he was God in the form of man on earth, and all Jesus Christ did was heal, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
He condemned religious hypocrites and people who are so evil that they're beyond repair, but like essentially he just came to forgive all evil.
Yeah.
For the most part.
So what was it? Well, I'll say two things. One of them is at some point in the Bible, Jesus looks into like it's like a well or water or something, and he sees all the sins that humans will ever create, and he still like after that still decides to sacrifice himself for humanity.
Yeah.
I don't know like how much of that is exactly true. But I think that's interesting because it just goes to, you know, prophesize more how like he is going to sacrifice himself, one, but also so that's why a lot of people say the Bible is a good story, right? But
it's to me it's the greatest story ever written, and one of the things that Jesus says when he's being crucified on the cross is he says, "Forgive them; they know not what they're doing."
Yep.
And that line always just fucking cuts me right in my core, because like there's so many things I have done in my life that I used to regret, but I no longer do because I believe, you know, I guess that I'm saved or whatever.
Sure. So this
is it's like it's just this idea that there's always room for growth, is I guess what Jesus is saying, you know.
Mm-hmm. So the second thing I'll say, modern day interpretations of Christianity, especially in the United States, would not be conducive of a Christ-like Christianity. So what I'm saying is, modern day Christians in the United States, based on their values, if they didn't, and this is something that they worry about, you know, testing if they're a good Christian or not. You know, do you help the poor? Do you help the needy? Do you judge less? Do you, you know, listen more? Do you pray? Do you X, Y, Z? Most people, and again, it's like the third time I've said it, would probably, if they didn't know it was Jesus Christ, if it was like a real person and he was there in front of them and he needed help, they would probably not help them, or they would probably judge him. Jesus was, from the understandings of the Bible, was somebody who told and encouraged love between neighbors and love between those who had differences, non-violence between those that were hoping to kill each other. He had also preached about welcoming refugees and accepting those that were different than us. We're all God's children, right? So modern day conservatives, or people that are more likely going to be towards the Christian side of religion in this country, are not of that kin. They are not somebody who is accepting to the refugees that would be entering this country. They are not somebody who is saying love thy neighbor, because they have prejudices towards people that are just in the same country but outside of their state, let alone their actual neighbors, or even let alone a different country. Say you live in Nevada, or say you live in New Mexico, and you have prejudice towards Mexicans. Like, yeah, that is your neighbor. So it's with that in mind that I could say, one, possibly Christians today in the United States have lost the teachings of Jesus Christ. Or moreover, perhaps the ideology of religion, or the ideology of what Christianity and its religious practices are, were not quite formed well enough in the Bible to have the lasting impression they need to today. Basically, and this could go back into the Gnosticism as well, the redefinitions or the redefining of what Christianity could be. Because it seems like it's fallen from what it was.
Not everyone who cries, Lord, Lord, is welcome into the kingdom of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I really like the book, The Didache, which I really think if you want to, if that's something that interests you.
Yeah, sure. I'll check it out. That'd be worth it. We talked about it.
You should check it out. It's pretty cheap. I could maybe even send you a link to the copy I bought, which has like 3 different translations. One that's like a little more modernized language. It doesn't have all the vowels.
I mean, that's fine. I'll be honest. If I ever read the Bible, I'll be reading it in its most direct translation from what it was written in. So,
if you want my recommendation, you should read the New King James Version, not the King James Version.
Okay.
I think that is the New King James Version has the most accurate translation of the original Greek and Hebrew.
Wasn't it Arambic? Or what was it called? The language that Jesus spoke.
Well, if you believe the stories, he spoke every language, but
I suppose, yeah, I guess.
Because he spoke in tongues, essentially.
Yeah.
But God. Well, he was born in Nazareth, and
he was born
there was a lot of different. It was kind of a melting pot area.
Wasn't Jesus born in Jerusalem?
Maybe.
I know it's Jesus of Nazareth, but I think he's of the Nazarene people. He's not. I think he was born in.
He grew up in Nazareth. Yeah.
Wasn't he born in?
All I remember is that he was born in a stable.
I mean, yeah. Look, here's the thing: when you try to use historical context from the Bible, it's that, like I said already, certain things either exist as stories that aren't real, or things that are stories that aren't real that are supposed to be lessons, or actual historical context. One of the things I can say for certain did not happen was the Tower of Babel. I guarantee, I can say with certainty, the Tower of Babel is a idiom for something else. The entire story is not. It's impossible. One, you cannot reach heaven from Earth by building any type of skyscraper or any type of tower of bricks to outer space. It doesn't work like that. We have proven that time and time again where our atmosphere starts and what happens beyond our atmosphere. It's outer space. 2, languages did not develop on Earth because angels made the people that were working disband and not be able to work together because they spoke different languages. That's not where language came from. We have lots of evidence of that as well, of where written history comes from, where languages developed and who those people that spoke them were. And I'll just leave it at that, honestly. With the Tower of Babel is probably the most profoundly metaphoric stories versus the actual history of of what happened at that time. What do you think of that assertion?
I think that's your prerogative, man, and
it's my prerogative to make assertions.
And to be honest, I don't really have too much of an opinion on that.
That's fine.
But I do say, when you were talking about that, about climbing up to heaven, I was just reminded of the story of Jacob, and it's I just love how the man literally goes up there to wrestle with God, and I always thought that was funny because that's such a.
You guys are wrestlers at your house,
obviously, for me and you, and for me, since I was a wrestler in the actual sport of wrestling, it's something that we do every day, is we wrestle with God,
Sure.
It's or at least the idea of God in your case,
I mean, I'm not going to lie, I don't wrestle with my thoughts of religion ever. I made up my mind about things, and I would love to be, I would love for there to be a God and to find evidence that convinces me otherwise, but my faith or lack thereof is not shaken on a daily basis. I don't really I don't have consideration towards hypothetical gods, unfortunately.
Well, I am glad that brought you peace.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it, honestly. I mean, peace, no. There's not really peace to be found in knowing that, or at least knowing to myself that when I die, that's it. Especially when you lose people that are young, friends that are young. That's hard because you know that that's all. And, you're not going to see them again. So it just teaches you to value what you have now. So I would say it hasn't really brought me peace. It just brings me a standard for evaluating religion.
Okay. So, do you have anything else you want to say? Otherwise, I kind of want to read you.
Yeah, go for it.
3 more quotes that I have, and I just kind of want to get your thoughts on them. I guess.
Read those quotes. We'll do a big kind of overview of everything we've spoken about today, and we'll leave our listeners or our viewers with a couple words. We'll go over some of the cool things that are happening in the next episode, and we'll also speak about how people can get their music to play at the begining and end of the podcast. We'll talk about that a little bit. But go ahead, Aidan.
Sure.
I'd love to
one of them. Okay. So I guess I'll start off with